if we only go in that direction in terms of high-tech adoption, we are immediately excluding a big part of the humanity that will never be able to afford this kind of expenses for producing their alternative source of water. And so they will simply remain with the few tap water that they have at the cost of the water in their country. So the solution to this is to go towards instead more sustainable technologies, like for instance the nature-based solutions. And so in this project in Nawamed we are experimenting green walls, for instance, for treating the grey water. And still the level of the technology is at a very developing phase. I mean, these kind of installations are the first in the world with the scale. We are just shifting from the lab scale, let's say, so experiments which are conducted in university or research institutes, and we have very few applications in the planet at full scale. And these pilots that we are realizing in Nawamed will be the references for the next generations, let's say, for better understand how these green walls can work in a practical way in the climate in which we are going to install them. It's like 30 years that I'm working in the sector of the nature-based solutions. And the first resistance we are finding everywhere in the planet in terms of adoption of the technology is the lack of awareness about the technology itself. What happens is that at academic level, even though we have now about 30 years of story, which is meaning thousands, tens of thousands of peer-reviewed papers, scientific literature and so on, which is available for the topic, still in the academies they are not teaching these kind of approaches, and they are just going with the business as usual model, which is the use of the known technologies that have been adopted in the last 30 years. And so let's say the first problem is the education. If we don't have subjects which are then covering relevant positions as stakeholders that have already been trained on this kind of approaches and technologies, then we will have to educate them afterward, and that's work to do. That's normally slowing down the approval processes and so on. So the first step that I think it's really the mandatory one is to force the adoption in the academies, even training the teachers themselves about these new approaches for the water management. The other point is the economic one. So a big issue is that in most of the countries we are paying water by a political mediation of its price. We are normally not paying the water enough in terms of what are the costs, the real cost for providing water with a good quality in all the houses. And so there are really few countries in Europe, like Denmark, where 1 cubic meter is paid like €9, Germany, where the price is around €5, 4 or 5 euro, and then all the rest of Europe is instead paying around 1-2 euro per cubic meter. And that's not enough, let's say, for covering all the technical costs. What's the disadvantage of this is that mainly when you have to invest, if you leave to the family, for instance, to invest on its own system for looping the grey water, for recycling the grey water inside the building, they will have to invest a few €1,000 for the installation. And if the payback time is too long, like 15 years, it will be really difficult to convince a family to put out from the pocket a lot of money all on a sudden for then getting it back in 15 years and then starting having some gains afterward. Normally it's quite difficult for the investors to think to a good investment with a so long payback period. And therefore, strategies like the one we have heard this morning proposed by the Malta government to subsidize this kind of installations in order to shorten the payback time could be really the good engine that is promoting the adoption of the technology. So most probably a subsidizing phase is needed at the beginning for starting, let's say, a wider approach. Then the market should do the rest, let's say.